everyone. Welcome to Wind Down Wednesdays. I'm your host, Paula Taylor, and this is episode 180. Seems like it took us a while to get from 150 to 180, but that's a lot of shows. So just a brief moment of celebration for the 180th time we get together to talk about a spiritual growth topic. And then for those of you in the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary, you will join me for a really powerful exercise today. So today we are talking about re-empowerment and the 5D. And this is one of those topics that I've been meaning to talk about for the last few weeks. I've been working on this for myself and things were just kind of happening. Last week, I just didn't have it in me to do a show at all. Occasionally that happens. There's a lot of energy around. And what we're going to focus on, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the ramifications of this and how this is working with this 3D to 5D shift. Because there is a physical shift going on, an energetic physical shift in the body. What I want to focus on today is what are the mechanics of this? At the end of the day, I'm an energy worker. I work with the anatomy of energy, and we're going to talk about what is going on in the body and in the energetic field in order to bring about this re-empowerment, which is a collective call. It's part of this collective call to awakening. So we're going to focus on that. Talk a little bit about kind of the broader implications of this. And if you're joining us newly or you haven't been listening for the last maybe 6 or 7 months, we've been talking a lot about this 3D to 5D shift. These are just words that we've chosen that essentially 3D is a denser reality. It is more fear-based. It is the either or, all or nothing, black or white kind of way that humanity has been existing. 5D is much more inclusive. It is about this expansion into the space around our bodies, about expansion into unconditional loving, about the yes and as opposed to the either or. And I think that's all I'm going to say about that until we kind of get into more of this. What I will say is that part of this shift is a physical energetic shift. So energy has physical substance. We may not be able to see it with the naked eye, but there is a substance to energy. That is my specialty. I've been working with energy professionally for over 20 years now. And what I've seen over the last couple of years is a shift in our energetic bodies in order to accommodate this global shift of incorporating more of this 5D reality into our 3D. We're not leaving the 3D because we still have bodies. What we're doing is actually expanding out, and we have access to way more energy than we've had in the past. Some of us have been doing this for many years. Some of us were born with innate abilities to connect to these spiritual realms. And it's very interesting to me if you think about, like, I remember being a kid back in the 80s, which dates me. There were, Miss Cleo was the psychic. That might have been early 90s on TV. And she was actually eventually, I think, pretty well considered to be a fraud and kind of sued, and some things happened. Psychic phenomenon, when I was young, were considered strange and out there, and people who believed in that were considered strange and out there. Now, I think you can visualize the shift in sort of picturing how many more people are open-minded to things like that. Some of these things are being measured scientifically, things that a lot of energy workers or intuitives have been working with for a long time are now actually kind of science is catching up to what intuition has told us for a long time. And also, there are charlatans in every career. There are bad doctors, there are good doctors, there are people who commit fraud, there are people who are here for the highest good. So, yeah, little bit of an ADHD tangent. I will say I had a migraine last week, and it tends to scramble my brain. So if my talking is a little bit disjointed, just bear with me. It's just how things are going. There's a lot of energy coming in. We're getting a lot of release and activation energy as I'm filming this. So bear with me a little bit. So there is an actual physical energetic shift in our bodies. And I started talking about this around August of 2023 when my guides were, I was going to say inviting me, directing me, it's a little stronger than inviting, to do a series of chakra activations where we were actually elongating the chakras. And you can go back and probably listen to me talk about that on TikTok. There are some short versions of those. And that was in anticipation of what happened last year, where in June we got this huge activation that at the time in 2023 they said would be like the power of 40 full moons. What they didn't tell me back in 2023 exactly was that it was just going to keep getting more and more and more intense. And I think that was purposeful because there would have been some fear around that for sure. So what is happening now is not only has our chakra system like elongated, but we are being asked to expand our auric field. The field of, or our etheric body is the field immediately around the body. Used to be just about 1 to 3 inches for most people. They are asking us to bring that out to at least probably 2 to 3 feet out from the body. Mine, they keep asking me to make it as big as like the space that I'm in, the room that I'm in. And it's interesting because there is a physical component to this. When I do etheric stretching with people, when I work with them on the table or virtually, you can do this virtually, my etheric body does not want to be that big. Originally, it was not really designed to be that big. So those of us who are here at this point in history are here to help transition through this change. And it's not an easy thing to do because we are having to change our system, our energetic system that we've been working with as humans for probably millennia. Things are changing. The etheric body is getting bigger. The quantum field has always been unlimited. Most of us haven't had access to that kind of infinite space. We're being asked to access that space more. We're being asked to build some light structure around the body, which I've been doing with people for a while. And now I'm going to talk about what's happening with this re-empowerment, what's happening energetically and in the physical body, because this is really important. So I'm trying to think back. Usually I tell a story and I'm like, well, this happened. And then I realized this. And like, this is one of those things that it's kind of hard to pinpoint when this first started coming in. I will mention my empowerment bowl, who has another name, but that's the polite name. If you're watching the video, you can see her up behind me. She's also the FAFO bowl, which is F around and find out. So back in February, my friend Jennifer actually picked this bowl out from my metal bowl distributor at the Tucson Gem Show. And all of my metal bowls have what I think of as like a dominant personality trait. There's something that they like to bring into the session. The little bowl behind me is a mini manifestation bowl. I have a larger version of that bowl. And I have a dissolving resistance bowl and some clearing bowls and expansion bowl. So when as soon as I felt this bowl, I was like, oh yes, this is definitely a bowl for me. And then I was kind of like, I wonder what, and she felt very feminine. She felt like a feminine energy. And then I was like, I wonder what she's here for. And the first thing I heard was FAFO, which is F round and find out, which has become a phrase that's been kind of repopularized, that I think I heard a lot when I was maybe like a teenager. And again, what that really means is empowerment. So right now we are being asked to reclaim our personal power, which is focused in the third chakra, the solar plexus chakra. And the reflection of that is this reclaiming of our collective power, which you can absolutely see being played out on the world stage right now, on the national stage here in the US, where people are essentially beginning to stand up to a system that's not been serving us for a really long time and been serving the richest of the rich, essentially. So what we're going to talk about is the mechanics of this, what's going on in the body, and how to work with this. So I got that bowl, and she's been hanging out in my home. I have like a home space, and then I have my office, and bowls sometimes go back and forth. And she's been very firmly hanging out here with me. Even if I take her to the office, she wants to come home. Sometimes the bowls do that to acclimate. It's kind of like when you get wood floors and they have to stay in the space for a while, like they want to stay in my energy and for us to get to know each other. But then I realized it was deeper than that. I realized that this last moon cycle that we just finished up was the beginning of this invitation to this re-empowerment. So I started working with this in my own body. I was working with the bowl. I was thinking about empowerment. I was feeling a lot of activation in my solar plexus chakra, some upper GI things, nausea, kind of just not feeling like I really wanted to eat. And what I realized somewhere along the way, I'm not exactly sure of the timing here, because sometimes like little pieces eventually come together to form a whole, and I don't see the whole until I look back and I'm like, oh, there's a piece and there's a piece and there's a piece, kind of like putting a puzzle together. So one of the other pieces that came up was that I had this realization, and I've talked about this on the show before. I carry extra weight around, especially in my abdomen. And I've known for a long time, I got a little dog confirmation. I said that, somebody grunted in the background. So I've known for a long time that there was a protective component there, that there was something like shielding, and that I was holding energy in that space. And I've worked with that on and off for a while, and I'll have sort of a release or kind of make a little progress, and then I feel like I get stuck again, or sometimes I even backslide a little bit. And so I was feeling into the solar plexus area. I got this beautiful bowl and I could feel her activating in there. And I kind of made this decision that I wanted to release this weight, not go on a diet, not go down any of the roads I've ever gone down before, eating disorder wise or in the physical, but in the energetic. I was like, what is this energy? I'm ready to let this go. I don't want to hold this energy anymore. And so I started looking at like, what is this energy that's being held in my belly? And I realized that a lot of it was not mine. A lot of it was energy that I've been holding for other people to try to help them feel comfortable. And we've talked before about codependence on the show, which my favorite definition of codependence is allowing for your own discomfort in order to make someone else comfortable. A lot of times the other person hasn't even asked for this. We are anticipating their needs. So I started realizing that I was holding energy that other people, when people come in and see me, I do set the intention to kind of be contracted in the session and to release things. But especially like in my personal life and the people I know personally, and probably some of the clients that I work with, I realize I've been holding on to this energy for them, this energy of discomfort. It's like, oh, this is uncomfortable for you. Well, I can take this on. I can hold this. That's actually a really old pattern seen in a lot of healers. There's this I remember talking about this with my mentor when I was about 19, this old sort of stereotype of the big woman, the big motherly, matronly woman who, like cradles you and holds you and basically takes on your energy so that you can let it go. This is not serving us. It hasn't been for a long time, but it's one of those old patterns that is really ingrained in us. This idea that, especially as women, not that all healers are women, but a lot of them are, as healers, and if you're a woman too, or you identify with this sort of role that women have been forced to play to the point that now we enforce it on ourselves, it's this idea of kind of being a container or a receptacle. I made a TikTok video, I think that was a couple years ago, where I said, you are not a container. So I started working with this in myself. I started realizing I set the intention to release this energy that wasn't mine, because some of it is mine. I want to find that. Is it ancestral? Is it mine? What is the energy? We talked about that a couple weeks ago, how to identify energy in your system. I figure out holding energy in my belly. I've known it for a while. I'm ready. I've got the courage to really face this now, to let this go. It's interfering with my physical well-being, and I want to be able to move more. There was a lot of things at play here when I set this intention. And so the first thing I did was just have all that energy removed. And I talked about this on one of the shows about releasing up and out through the crown. That's one of the beautiful options we have now. We used to have to kind of release everything down into the earth. She doesn't want all of our garbage anymore. So now we're releasing out into the crown. We can actually release out through the side body. There's this beautiful lattice work of light that's being built, of an actual structure to help pull this energy out. And then this lattice connects in with that archangel net that wraps around the world. And it allows us to kind of release energy into that. And then it gets transmuted into love, into light, and we can call it back in if we want. So a couple of really interesting things happened. I set this intention, and then within about, I would say 3 weeks, I had some shifts in my physical reality. I had some people leaving my field. I had someone I had been fairly close to kind of leave my field. And this is always difficult. So I want to talk about this a little bit. We've talked about this before. As your vibration shifts, the energy within your body shifts, the energy around your body shifts, and people will respond to that. Whether they're aware of it or not, they will respond to it. And sometimes their response is that they no longer want to be in your vibration. And it's interesting, this actually leads directly into the like more personal stuff that is mine, that I realized was underneath all of this. There's a lot of insecurity around that. There's a lot of fear around that. I grew up as someone, it's 11:11 as I say this. Actually, it is 11:11. Sometimes my clock here is wrong. So I grew up as kind of a weird neurodivergent kid who took everything literally. So I did a lot of waiting around for people. People would say, oh, I'll call you tomorrow. And I didn't realize for a long time that was just something people said and didn't actually follow through on. Because if I say I'm going to do something, I usually follow through on it. And so I spent a lot of time kind of feeling rejected. I was kind of a weirdo. I got bullied or picked on at school. I didn't really fit in. I never really felt, even through high school, I just couldn't find a group. One-on-one, I did really well, but in groups, it was just like I could never find a dynamic that seemed to call to me, and I was never very good at pretending. So that didn't serve me in that way either, in terms of fitting in. However, what I realized as I got older and as I've been kind of feeling into this energy is that I've internalized so much of that judgment that it's actually physically in my body. It's physically being held in my body. We're going to come back to that. What I want to say just briefly is that when we're not meant to vibrate at the same frequency for our entire lives. That would be really boring and stagnant. And other people are not meant to stay with us all the time. Sometimes they are. Sometimes we kind of make a contract that we're going to like ebb and flow together with someone. But a lot of times I like to think about this in terms of a symphony. And usually when you go to the symphony, if you watch an orchestra play, sometimes everybody's playing at the same time, but a lot of times they're not. A lot of times, like the oboe and the clarinet are playing together, or the cello and the violin are playing together, and no one else is playing. Sometimes you have a solo playing completely by yourself. I was thinking about this morning. I was an oboe player, an orchestral oboe player for years, and there's something very frightening about having a solo. That's the part you really have to practice for, because that's when everybody can hear you. And it can feel like you're just hanging out there all alone. Sometimes there's a little bit of kind of background, the strings are holding a long note or something, but sometimes literally you're the only one playing. That really does reflect our spiritual journey. There are times on this journey when you feel completely alone. We sometimes call that hermit mode. There might be vibrations around you, but you can't seem to line up with any of them. And none of them feel necessarily like they're supporting you. You're out there with your oboe, just playing all by yourself, crossing your fingers that your reed is good and that you don't flub up and people aren't making fun of you because you've messed up. Sometimes another instrument comes in and you're playing together and you're playing off of each other and you're having a really beautiful conversation. Sometimes more people come in and you have this sense of community. All of it is equally valid and an equally beautiful part of the symphonic piece, the overall performance. We have sort of lost the understanding that there's a natural ebb and flow here. And a lot of times, like for people like me, especially if you're neurospicy, we sort of internalize this idea that anytime somebody leaves our field, we've done something wrong. And for me, when I started realizing, when I kind of let go of all this energy that wasn't mine, and I'm like, I'm not holding this energy for people anymore. It's not my job. It doesn't serve other people to hold energy for them, because that energy is there for them to learn from. It doesn't serve you because you can't work with your own energy if you're holding other people's energy. It can also make you ill. It can actually physically affect you. So as I set the intention to release this energy that was not mine and to no longer hold on to this energy that wasn't mine, I saw a lot of shifting in my external world. I saw some things moving and shifting and people kind of moving around. The symphony changed. It's like we went into a different piece, and maybe I was playing with this group of strings and now all of a sudden I'm playing with another group of winds or something. And the first thing I realized was how triggering that is. it begins to trigger all of these personal power things. That's where we kind of go into like how this affects you in the actual body. So what I realized one day, I was doing a meditation that we've done in the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary a couple times, that's based on this Joe Dispenza Blessing the Energy Centers, where you just kind of move up through the chakra system. And I was really exploring the third chakra, the solar plexus chakra. And I was kind of playing with this idea. There's like a point in this meditation where it naturally feels like you're ready to move up to the next chakra. And I felt this resistance kind of between the third and fourth chakra, between the solar plexus and the heart. And I was like, what's going on here? Like, why is this not a smooth transition? So I started feeling out internally, energetically along my rib cage, and realizing that there was like a stuck place just under my rib cage. That is your diaphragm. So your diaphragm looks kind of like a big umbrella, and it sits underneath the rib cage. And it's a super important muscle, and it's an interesting muscle because it's both under conscious and unconscious control. So like the motility of your gut, that's unconscious. You don't really have control over that consciously, unless, maybe you've done a ton of work and you're like a yogi who can really zoom in on that. Your bicep muscle, that's a conscious control. I have to send a signal to set the intention to bend my arm and contract my bicep. The diaphragm is both. So you breathe on your own, right? You don't have to think about breathing, but you can also decide to change your breathing, to deepen your breathing. And the diaphragm is a huge muscle that gets really tight and doesn't really ever get released. And when you breathe in, your diaphragm moves down to make your rib cage larger, to open space for your lungs, to create a vacuum so the air comes into your lungs. And then as you breathe out, the diaphragm comes back up. And as I started feeling into this area and realizing there was like some tension and tightness and like an energetic stuckness that was keeping the energy from kind of releasing and moving up into my heart space, started thinking about my diaphragm. And I started thinking, first of all, when was the last time someone released it? Probably in massage school. And then I started realizing that it was a space of storage. So I've talked about in the book, and we've talked out on the show about the back body, this idea of like, we shove things behind us that we're not ready to look at. We shove things down in the pelvis a lot of times, especially trauma. This is another area. All of a sudden I realized we shove stuff up into this. It's almost like a little storage space, because there's this little hollow underneath your rib cage where there's this big, beautiful muscle kind of draped. And for me, what I discovered, and I am 100% sure I'm not alone on this, a lot of this personal empowerment stuff, a lot of the fears and insecurities around myself as a person were shoved up into this space underneath my rib cage, into the diaphragm space. And the first thing is that I couldn't even find this energy until I released the energy that wasn't mine. That was all in the way. Couldn't even find my own energy because I had so much energy I was holding on to that I had picked up from other people or sort of implicitly agreed to hold. So when I was like, I'm not holding this energy anymore, all of a sudden it was like, oh, so what is my energy doing in this space? And it felt very, very stuck and very, very contracted. And so slowly I started working with this using a physical exercise that we'll use in the Spiritual Integration or Awakening Sanctuary in our guided meditation activation today. But I also started just thinking about this, just like working with this consciously, meditating, kind of lying on my bed or sitting, and then just being like, well, what's up here? Like, and it was one of those places that at first felt kind of really dark and scary. I was like, ooh, I don't know if I want to look in there. What is there? Like, it felt like a lot. It felt like there was a lot of like, stuck there. So as I started to explore this, I was like, oh, this is all of my like personal power fears, like my lack of confidence, my lack of self-esteem, my fear of being judged, my fear of not being enough, my fear of being too much. All of these like things that have been programmed in so many places, societally, culturally, in the family, ancestrally. This stuff has been passed down about how you're supposed to appear in the world. Don't be too big. That's threatening. Don't be too small. You'll get walked on. It. Like, it's all of this kind of stuff. And when I first started feeling into this, I was like, oh, well, I don't know what to do with this. Like, it was really, really, really stuck. And that's where I started doing some physical work, some fascial work, because the fascia, the web of connective tissue that wraps all the way around your body, wraps around all the organs and the viscera and the muscles themselves. This is where we hold the light in our body. So energetically, we are holding light in our bodies, in the chakra system, in the meridians, in the fascia around the body. And how does it connect to the physical body? A lot of that is through the fascia. And so I started thinking and realizing how tight the fascia, or fascia, depending on how you say it, was in that part of the body. And then as I started to kind of gently work with actually touching it, I could begin to feel some of these things loosen. And as they loosened, they became more intense. That does happen sometimes. So I spent a lot of this last moon cycle really kind of struggling with these doubts about what I'm doing and who I am, and am I worthy, and can I do this, and things like that. Am I too much? Am I enough? It's just such a distraction, and it's such a it's very insidious. It can be very all-encompassing, and it's not serving us, and it hasn't been serving us for a long time. And this is where this 5D shift is coming in. So as we have more access to release in other ways, releasing out the side of the body, releasing up energetically, as I began to pull that energy that wasn't mine up and out through my crown, my whole body felt like it grew. I felt like I grew about an inch or two. And then that opened up the space to really look at this. As I began to release that, it started opening up space to release more out to the side. This is intentional. This is part of this 3D to 5D shift. Eventually, people won't have to do this consciously. It will just be a natural part of the energetic body we're born with. I think there are some young children that are already coming in that way, and people talk about it, about how they seem different and they seem more spiritually open and more kind of cognizant of things at an earlier age. They're coming in, I think, with this structure already created. Those of us who agreed to kind of help make this transition have to do this work consciously. And for most of us, we need support for this work. Even if you're doing this work on yourself, there comes a point when you need someone else to hold space for you. You need to talk about what's coming up with a mental health professional. You need to get this somatically released from your body from someone like me who does energy work, or you need some sort of a combination of, like coaching and energy and physical to kind of help move this, because the only way to activate these other pathways of flow around the body is to allow more flow within the body. So when we have a diaphragm that's really clenched up and even spasmed up and it's pushing, the other thing this does, like so many of us have issues with things like reflux, physically this is pushing everything sort of up. The way it came in, it's come in a couple times like a corset. If you're wearing a corset and it's pushing in and it's pushing up, first of all, you get a lot of tension in the upper body. Your lungs are constricted. So if your diaphragm's really tight and it's not dropping the way it's supposed to when you breathe, there's less space for your lungs to expand. And then your lungs start to get irritated, and you can get things like asthma problems, like I have sometimes, where everything's irritated. There's not enough space for things to move around. The fascia should be really flowing and open and well moistened. And for a lot of us, as we age, especially, it tends to get tight. It tends to get dry. It tends to get bound up in places. And we need help kind of moving that in order to allow the light, the energy to flow through. These things are integrally, that's not the right word. These things are interwoven in a way they cannot be unwoven. That's my brain talking. We cannot separate the physical from the energetic, especially now. For a long time, we've gotten away with pretending the energetic or the spiritual didn't even exist and focusing on the physical and maybe a little bit on the mental. That is not going to serve us in this transition. And as we move forward, we are going to be less and less functional if all we are focused on is the physical. We do need to focus on the physical, but it needs to be part of this overall, this holistic focus. How does my physical body affect my light body, my energetic body, and vice versa? What can I do to support my physical body and my energetic body and my emotional body and my mental body? All of that can begin to feel like a lot. But as we unwind these things, as I started to unwind my diaphragm, and I'm still kind of in the process of that, we can do this slowly. That's the other thing. The 3D is that no pain, no gain mentality, all or nothing. Got to do it all today or I didn't even do it at all. We need to let that go. When we do something like that, if I have someone come in and they get on my massage table and they say to me, like they do often, oh, I haven't had a massage in 20 years. And then they expect in an hour that everything's going to be quote unquote fixed. Even if I could do that, it would put that person in, they have long-term patterns of compensation, of ways that they've been holding their body and of spasming. If I released all of that in one session, it would actually cause more problems than it solved. So we can do this slowly. We can do this with love. We can do this in a way that we allow for these fears to come up and we look at them and we hold them and we send love to them. And slowly we unwind this physically and emotionally and energetically in order to create more opening, more space for deeper breathing, more space for that light to move through the body, more space to connect to the space around our body. And the implication of this is the reason that I focus on personal work. I say this over and over again, the macro, the larger scale is a reflection of the micro. What is happening inside of you is being reflected societally. So right now there's a lot of upheaval and there's a lot of like really intense things going on. We're being asked to wake up and to re-empower ourselves, to reclaim our power. And it can be a little daunting. How do we do this? How do we do this as a collective? We do this by starting individually, by starting in ourselves, by starting one-on-one, by starting in small communities, by supporting each other as we do this work. And then slowly, that's what is actually truly a grassroots movement. As we begin to shift our systems on a personal level, then we can begin to shift things on the macro. But if you're like me and you're looking at what's going on right now and you're just kind of like shoulder shrug, I don't know how to help. I don't know what I can do. For me, focusing on the spiritual, you can never go wrong with that. It doesn't mean we don't also take action in the physical realm. Again, everything is interconnected. We've got to do all of it. We can't just focus on the spiritual, like where's, how are you going to eat? Like they have to coexist. But for a long time, there has been no focus on the spiritual in our society. And the only focus on the spiritual has been through the dogma of religion, through this control, through someone else telling you how to experience your own spirituality. That is no longer serving. And people have known that for a while. Any kind of patriarchal, hierarchical, ladder-like system has no space in the 5D. And they're all going to come tumbling down. And what happens as they crumble, as the tower crumbles in the tarot, it's really scary. The things are on fire and people are jumping out of the tower. And if you look at the original tarot deck with the tower, it's a scary looking card. There's a reason people are frightened when the tower comes up. But it's also how we build something new. The old comes crumbling down, and then we have the opportunity to say, how am I going to build something better? How am I going to build something more inclusive that serves more people, that really takes care of not just me, but my neighbors and the people around me and the people in my family that I love and care about? We had to expose the shadow in order to see just how much this is not working for us, all of these systems. And the way we build them anew is to start individually and start in small communities, is to find all of these fears and doubts that we have in ourselves that are keeping us from showing who we really are. We are all magnificent beings of light and love. That is what we are made of. We have all of this programming that has told us to be small in order to keep us easily controlled. This is getting into this broader implication. When you claim your power back, people will find it threatening in your individual life and collectively. If we all stand up and say, I'm not shopping on this day, that's something that's been going on. it sends a message, right? There is power in the collective, but we have to do this work. The individuals make up the collective. So as you get your very own FAFO bowl, your empowerment bowl, as you do this empowerment work, know that it will be triggering for those around you. And that's okay. As your frequency changes, you never play through the entire symphony alone. Someone always comes back in to join you. Even if you're playing a concerto, if I play Mozart's oboe concerto, the whole orchestra is behind me, supporting me. I may have a cadenza, I may have a moment at the end where I'm like playing all around and everyone has stopped and they're waiting, and then they still come back in and join me at the end. So some of this is, it takes a lot of courage to do this, to reclaim your power, to re-empower yourself, because it's not just threatening to people around you sometimes, it is threatening to the system at large. And the system is trying to maintain its control as much as it can. Just like my poor diaphragm is like, oh no, I don't want to loosen up. This is how I've maintained control of the breathing for so long. But then it's like, hey, actually controlling the breathing is not really helping me. Controlling the breathing is restricting my breathing. It's restricting my voice. It's restricting how well I can sing. When I get to this part that kind of passes through this area and I get some wobbles and pimply kid Simpsons, like, that's what I always think of it as, like, you know, when your voice cracks. Flow requires some structure, absolutely, but it requires even more flexibility. And when we have all of these rigid structures within and around us, we cannot flow in the way we're meant to. We lose the flexibility that we're meant to have. And it is scary to step out of those patterns because they have been around for so long. The discomfort we know is sometimes less scary than the complete unknown. But I will tell you, having done this work personally for 30 years now, plus, I don't know, math is not my strong suit, for a long time, we've done this work now for a long time, I never once have I ever regretted stepping into courage. In the moment, going through the process, when the tower is crumbling, I might be like, why did I do this? As I'm like crumbling and the rubble's coming down around me. And every single time, once the dust settles, I step into something that is so much more expanded and so much more loving and so much more blissful. And I understand how hard it is. I understand how much courage it takes to let that tower crumble, to let yourself just be surrounded by rubble and dust and not know where you're going to go, how you're going to get out of it, what is the path forward, where do I sleep tomorrow night? My whole everything has crumbled around me. And it's always in those moments that somebody shows up and says, oh, you need a place to stay? Here, come over here. Oh, do you need this? Come on over here. And that is where that trust and faith is so important. And I think even the word faith, when I use that word, it's been so co-opted by religion that it has, like, it's just like when I say angelic and people go, ugh. I did it for a long time. I get it. Our power has been removed from us, even in the words that resonate. Angelic just means one differentiation from source. It just means close to source. That's really what angelic means. But it has been co-opted into all of this dogma and all of these rules and this idea about what is what and what is what. And it's the same thing with that word faith, which is why a lot of times I use the word trust. Every single time I have taken a leap of faith, something has come in to reinforce that in a beautiful way. So as we do this work of re-empowerment, know that it is triggering for us. It can be triggering for those around us. It will absolutely trigger more instability in the system. But the only way to move forward, the only way past the tower card is to let it crumble. Once the card comes out, we are playing a collective tower card right now. The entire world. You can't put that card back in the deck. I heard a really interesting thing the other day. And apparently she said it in 2020. It was Sonia Renee Taylor, who I've talked about on the show before. She wrote The Body Is Not an Apology. And she was talking about the US, and this is kind of political, but this goes to all of this. This is true for all of this. And she was talking about how if you bake a cake and you put a cup of salt instead of a cup of sugar in the cake, you can't take the salt back out of the cake. She was talking about the foundations that America was built on, and the idea that these foundations of freedom, you know, that part might have been fine. That part of the cake was fine. But then we put in a cup of colonization and slavery and not really believing that women have equal rights and all of this like yuckiness and genocide of the indigenous culture. That's the salt. You can't take that out of the cake once it's baked. The only way to start over, you have to start completely over. You have to throw the cake out and build a new cake. And that is what the tower is. It's an extremely scary moment. But once the tower card is out, you're either pretending that it's not happening and like just the dust is around you anyway, the rubble's falling around anyway. At least if you have your eyes open and a big rock is falling toward you, you can move to the side. If you are pretending that none of this happens, if you are kind of getting stuck in the fear, it's happening anyway. The only way through the tower is to allow for the crumbling. Is to just watch it come down and then say, okay, where do I start from here? And I get it. It's really scary. It's really overwhelming. And so I am always going to come back to this idea that focusing on yourself is the most feasible, tolerable way through this. I can't control the tower once it starts crumbling. You know, it's like Jenga. I can't put the piece back in that made the whole thing crumble. It's falling down. I can just step back out of the way and make sure that I'm safe and make sure that my family is safe. And spiritually, we do that through this work of expansion. Every time I expand, not only do I feel better emotionally, I am retraining my nervous system that it is safe. I am opening pathways of more energy to come in, more expansion, what people call abundance. This is what this work is for. And it's not for the faint-hearted. It's not, but it's also, there's no choice at this point. So if you want to work with this idea on your own, you can start with just awareness. What's going on in my solar plexus? Is this energy mine? Is this energy serving me? Setting the intention to release energy that's not yours, to release energy that's not serving you. And somatically, you'll probably need help. Emotionally and energetically, you may need help. But just beginning to explore this. This may be the first time you've ever thought about the diaphragm. You've ever thought about, you might go and look at a picture and see what it looks like. And just start thinking about that. Just start meditating on it. Maybe directing some energy with your hands. There's a Reclaiming Core energy meditation on my website. You can also get that on Insight Timer. That would be a place to start working with this area if you want some assistance in that way. If you want more assistance and you are enjoying the show and you would like access to the meditations and activations that we do every week together, to the bonus episodes, to support from other people going through this tower moment, exclusive discounts, you can join the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary. There is a link in the podcast notes. There is also a link at the bottom of every page of my website. We would love to have you join us. Being in a small supportive community is how we rebuild. We watch the tower burn. We support each other. We help each other the best we can, and then we can begin to rebuild from these small communities of support. You are divine source. Own that power. It is here to serve you and for you to serve the collective. Have a beautiful rest of your day or evening. I will see you on the next episode of Wind Down Wednesdays.